Hey guys, tonight we wait before the sun, in a house with no glass in the windows, no fire in the hearth, and no idea if the cold will outlast the turnips. Your breath fogs as you sit up under the weight of a blanket that smells faintly of sheep and mostly of damp. You're not a noble or a monk or anyone who might own something like spices. You're a medieval peasant, and this morning, like most, you're eating something pale, boiled, and slightly earthy. That's right. We're talking about vegetables, and you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your city and local time in the comments so I know when and where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You choose slowly. It's not because you're savoring. It's because this particular turnip was stored through the winter, and time has not been kind. The outside is bruised, the inside slightly soft, and no amount of boiling could quite mask the fact that it used to be frozen solid. But it's food, and that matters more than taste. The turnip is one of your staples. It grows deep in the ground, where the frost can't reach too fast. It stores well, kind of, and it doesn't mind poor soil, just like you. It is reliable, affordable, and perfectly suited to a life where you own more bruises than blankets. You eat it every day in some form, boiled, mashed, sliced into stew, or, on special occasions, pickled, which mostly means it tastes like vinegar and regret. Historians still debate whether the medieval diet was as grim as it's often portrayed. Some say peasants had more variety than we give them credit for. Others point out that variety is generous when your choices are old root or older root. Still, the turnip is a gift. It holds calories, and calories mean warmth, and warmth means you can go outside and do something painful to your back while the land refuses to thank you for it. You trudge into the field with the taste of root still coating your tongue. The shovel is heavy, the ground is stiff, and you can already feel the ache settling into your spine. But you dig anyway, because if you're lucky, the earth will give back something shaped like a swollen toe, and you'll say, "Good, that one's solid." You've learned to spot the bad ones, the ones riddled with wormholes, the ones that turn to sponge when you press them, the ones that grew too close to the privy trench and now smell like theology class after a storm. You toss those to the pigs, assuming the pigs are still alive, and assuming you're still allowed to keep them. You keep digging. The sun rises higher, and your breath stops fogging. The frost lifts from the grass. Your fingers are numb, but your stomach is not empty, and that's as close to success as you get in a week like this. You remember once, as a child, trying to plant a sweet apple seed in the corner of the garden. It didn't take. too cold, too damp, too optimistic. But the turnips, they always grow. Not beautifully, not evenly, but consistently. They are the friend who never compliments you, but always shows up. You gather them in a sack. They thud against each other like skulls in a reliquary. You carry them back to the cottage, sling them by the hearth, and the firewood pile that already looks too small for the month ahead. You sit. You peel one. The cat watches you like you're holding meat. You're not. You're holding disappointment and dinner, and next week's lunch, all in one sad spear. And yet, you're alive. Because of these roots. You're breathing. Your children, if they made it, are playing with the dried stems out back. Your joints ache. Your house leaks. Your soul is tired, but your body is fed. You light a candle, saying nothing. Eat your turnip, and think, maybe tomorrow we find a leak. You wake to the sound of dripping again. It's either the roof or your own nose, possibly both. The air inside the cottage smells like wood smoke and feet, and when you sit up, your back lets you know it hasn't forgiven you for yesterday. You grope around for your shoes, find one under the stool, and the other half buried in hay. You put them on, even though they're still damp. You know what today is. It's leak day. Technically, it's not any kind of official day, but the patch behind the house has been waiting for a week, and your stomach has begun dropping hints. You throw a ragged cloak over your shoulders, splash your face with water so cold it qualifies as punishment, and step into the chill. The leaks are where they always are, standing proudly in a thin line of reluctant soil, green shafts poking up like they belong here more than you do. Leeks are loyal. They overwinter like champions. They don't mind wet feet or frostbitten mornings. They don't require fussing. They grow even when hope doesn't. You grab a knife, kneel down, and begin the slow, ritual work of harvesting. Pull, twist, slice, shake. The dirt falls away in clumps. The roots dangle like untidy hair. You hold up the first one and admire it like you're meeting a friend who remembered your birthday. It smells assertive, not sweet, not gentle, but like something alive. You remember that leeks aren't just food, they're currency. A bundle of fresh leeks can buy you eggs, or a patch for your tunic, or, if the Reeves wife is feeling generous, a day's mercy on your tax grain. Historians still argue whether leeks were considered valuable or merely tolerable. You'd argue they were both, because while they might not taste like feast daydreams, they have range. You can boil them into broth, chop them into pottage, bake them into ash cakes, rub them on blisters. Yes, really, it burns, but you're told that's the point. And once, during an especially lean Lent, you chewed a raw one out of sheer hunger and hallucinated the Virgin Mary for 20 minutes. She told you to add salt. You smile at the memory. Not because it was holy, because it was funny. The cat trails you back inside, tail twitching. You clean the leaks with water from the barrel. The outer leaves peel away like soggy parchment. You chop the tender bits with a knife that's been resharpened more times than it deserves. The pot goes on the fire. You drop in the leeks a handful of barley, yesterday's turnip, and hope. Always hope. It starts to smell like something worth sitting down for. Steam curls toward the ceiling. Your stomach grumbles. And for a moment, just a flicker, it almost feels like luxury. You sit on the stool. The cat curls around your foot. And you eat. The broth is thin. The barley's stubborn. But the leeks? The leeks are the story. Sharp. Green. Tired. But still trying. You slurp loudly. Because manners are for people with enough food to pretend. You think of tomorrow. Of the rest of the patch. Of what you can trade. Maybe you'll take a bundle into town. Offer it to the baker for a loaf that hasn't been rebaked twice. Maybe you'll hang one from the rafters to keep the spirits out. You heard that once from a shepherd who never bathed, but always had good luck with lambing. Maybe you'll dry the leaves. Add them to the salve. Maybe you'll just eat them again. Because they're there. And when you live like this, survival has a smell. And today, it smells like leek. You wake to a thud on the roof. It's not alarming. Just cabbage. Well, probably not cabbage falling from the sky, but the wind has picked up overnight. And the rafters have started catching bits of someone's thatch or a neighbor's laundry. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and poke your head outside, just in case. No cabbage, just wind, and the smell of damp soil and boiled greens. You go back inside and sit by the hearth. You reach for the basket by the wall and pull out what's left of last week's prized possession. A cabbage the size of a child's head, round and dense as a sermon. Cabbage is your winter champion. It stores better than turnips. It doesn't disintegrate like leeks. It waits for you. Patient, bitter, and slightly judgmental, but there when you need it. You cut it in half. Its size. Or maybe that's just you. You pull out your knife again, which is a little duller than it was yesterday, and start slicing. The layers fall apart like tired parchment, curling as they land in the pot. You add some salt, a splash of vinegar if you've got it, and water, of course. Always water. Sometimes it's more soup than vegetable, but the point is warmth, volume, something to fill your belly and remind your bones that they belong to a body. Cabbage tastes like survival. It's not joyful. It's not surprising, but it works. You've grown it every season you could. Sometimes big and leafy, sometimes stunted and angry at the weather. It doesn't care for drought. It sulks under frost. But if you tend it, if you whisper to it once in a while, it might just give you something substantial. Not delicious, just enough. You remember a winter 3 years ago when the cabbages were all blighted. You'd pulled 6 heads from the field, only to find them rotted from the inside, black-veined and soft. You cried over those cabbages, sat down in the dirt, and wept like they were kin. Because they were, in a way. Cabbage meant the difference between a spring where your children played in the mud and a spring where you buried a third of what you'd hoped would grow. Historians sometimes call the medieval peasant diet monotonous. You'd call it miraculous, not in flavor, in function. Because here's the thing they forget. You didn't eat cabbage because you loved it. You ate cabbage because it didn't die. Cabbage saw your hunger, your weather, your long, lean weeks, and still kept growing. You take a spoonful from the pot. It tastes of memory and steam. You chew slowly. Grit your teeth once. The outer leaves were stubborn again. You wonder, not for the first time, who decided cabbage was food. Whether someone just got tired of chewing bark and thought, sure, this leaf ball will do. Your neighbor, when you still had one, used to boil it with barley. You remember that smell drifting over the fence, sour and thick, clinging to the thatch like bad news. Sometimes you'd trade one cabbage for a cup of broth, one moment of something different. It was never about flavor. It was about not starving. The cat bats at a loose leaf on the floor. You pick it up and chew it without thinking. Even raw, it fights back. You glance at the pot, still steaming. You glance at the sack. One cabbage left. You let yourself feel a little proud. Because growing cabbage isn't glamorous. It's grit, and you have it in spades. Tomorrow, you'll pull weeds around the next row. You'll turn compost into the soil like it's prayer. You'll hope for one more harvest before the ground hardens again. And you'll give thanks, not out loud, but in the way your hands move, steady and certain, planting the future one bitter leaf at a time. The frost is back, biting at your ankles like it has something to prove. You light a fire with damp wood and curse it gently, just enough to feel better, not enough to bring bad luck. The air smells like smoke and soggy wool, and you know what the day demands before your stomach even starts its slow grumble. It's time to dig up the rutabagas. You sigh, not because you mind the work, though your back disagrees, but because rutabagas are a chore before they're even food. Thick-skinned, heavy, too large to be friendly, too small to feel like a feast. They're the introverts of the vegetable patch. Underground, complicated, slightly bitter. You grab your sack, your spade, and your best impression of optimism. The field is stiff with half-frozen mud. You kneel anyway. Wedge the spade under the stubborn root. Twist, and out it comes. A rutabaga, waxy, yellowish, and covered in dirt that refuses to let go. You thump it against your knee, a little hardier than you remember. Good. You gather more. Each one thuds into the sack like a slow, resigned heartbeat. Rutabagas are a cross between turnips and cabbages, nature's awkward middle child. They weren't always common. Historians still argue whether they were eaten widely in the early Middle Ages or showed up later as desperation food during famines. But here, now, in your life, they're here to stay. Because they survive. Even when you barely do. You carry the sack back like a child half your weight. You set it down by the hearth with a groan and a muttered prayer. The cat jumps on top of it and claims it as her throne. Fair. She's earned it too. You start peeling. The skin is thick and smells faintly of earth and wood smoke. You know the flavor already. A little sweet, mostly bland, and slightly peppery. You'll boil it down until it softens. Maybe mash it if there's butter. Maybe fry it if there's fat. There probably isn't. Still, you'll eat it. You always do. You remember the famine 2 years ago when the barley failed and the rats got bold. You had 3 rutabagas left, and you cut one in half, buried it back in the ground, and prayed. It didn't grow, but it did keep you from starving. So maybe that's enough. You dice the root into chunks. Toss them in the pot with salt, if you're lucky, and water that's almost warm. It bubbles like it believes in you. You stir slowly. Rutabagas don't pretend. They are what they are. Not a delight. A duty. But in a world where hunger knocks more often than guests, duty is delicious. You sit on your stool, tuck your feet under your skirt, and let the scent fill the room. It smells humble, and that's okay, because you don't need luxury. You need fuel, and rutabagas give you that. Not all at once, not extravagantly, but like quiet reassurance, like someone saying, "Here, I'm still with you." You ladle some into a bowl. Eat slowly, chew fully, and think, it isn't joy, but it's enough. You wake to beans, not the smell, the sound. A soft clatter near the window, tiny, dry impacts against the sill. You know it instantly. Wind knocking the last of the dried broad bean pods loose from the rafters where you hung them 3 months ago. You shuffle out of bed, blanket still clinging to one shoulder, and scoop the beans from the floor. A handful of dusty, flat, off-white discs with the potential of life still locked inside them. You set them on the table like tiny stones, reverent, because broad beans aren't glamorous, but they are your lifeline. Also called fava beans, though no one here calls them that unless they're trying to sound like they know Latin. They are your only real protein. Unless you count hope, or beetles. You crack one open. The skin is paper thin and bitter. You'll boil that out later. You'll boil everything later. You toss them into the pot with whatever's left from yesterday, probably rutabaga, maybe leek, definitely some regret. They'll need hours, days, if they're being stubborn, but they'll soften. They always do. Like you. You used to hate them. The way they never tasted like what you wanted. The way they repeated on your breath. The way they filled your belly, but never your soul. But now you see them for what they are. Persistence in edible form. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had reliable access to beans year-round. You can confirm. Reliable is a generous word. You grow what you can. You dry what you dare. And you hope nothing molds before you remember it exists. You walk out to check the trellis. The old vines are skeletal, brown and rattling, like a warning. But you know they'll return in spring if you save the seeds. And you will. You pick a few more pods, cracked, brittle, nearly hollow. Each one is a gamble. Each one a maybe. You carry them back in your apron. Shell them by the fire, popping them open with cold fingers, watching the beans fall like coins you'll never spend. The cat watches, judging. You offer her one. She sniffs it, blinks, walks away. You chuckle. Beans are a taste acquired over necessity. Cats don't do necessity. You add more to the pot. The stew is starting to thicken. It smells earthy, a bit flat. You toss in a few herbs, dried thyme, maybe some wild mustard seed you found near the stream. You stir clockwise because someone once told you it's bad luck not to. You taste. Too hot, too bland, too necessary. You eat anyway. You chew. You swallow. You wait. And there it is. That slow, creeping warmth. The kind that starts behind your ribs and tells your brain you're not starving. Not today. You sigh. A long, warm breath. The cat returns. You offer her a second bean. She slaps it off the table. Fair. You sit back, empty bowl in hand, and listen to the wind push through the walls. And you think, broad beans aren't glamorous. They're not festive. They'll never be mentioned in a love song. But they stay. They last. They show up. And so do you. You brush crumbs off your lap, wrap your shawl tighter, and smile at the pot still bubbling gently. Because in a world where the wind takes roofs and the harvest takes nerve, beans give back. And that's enough. This morning, the ground is stiff with frost and your breath curls like smoke. You step outside to a sky the color of old milk and a chill that settles deep into the parts of you that never quite warm up anymore. You know what day it is. Parsnip Day. You head to the far corner of the garden, the patch you left alone on purpose. Parsnips are better after a frost. The cold turns their starch to sugar, and suddenly they taste less like dirt and more like slightly fancier dirt. If you're lucky, maybe even a whisper of sweetness. You grab your spade and start digging. The soil fights you. Of course it does. But you win. You always do. The first parsnip comes up thick and pale, gnarled at the tip, like it got halfway through a thought and gave up. You knock it against the stone wall, brush the dirt from its skin, and smile. It's not beautiful, but it's honest. Parsnips are like you that way. They grow best when ignored, thrive in bad conditions, and only really reveal their value after they've been frozen. You carry them inside in a basket lined with burlap and your own misplaced optimism. The fire's already going. The pot already waits. You scrape the skin off with your belt knife and slice the flesh into coins that look like ivory, if ivory came from bitterness and cold weather stubbornness. You toss the pieces into the pot with a little garlic, maybe some barley if you're feeling bold. It all blurs together anyway. The house fills with the smell of root and hope. You sit down while it cooks. The cat jumps into your lap and kneads your thigh like you're a loaf of bread she never intends to finish. You don't mind. Parsnip stew doesn't need watching. It needs patience. You've got that. You remember when you were younger, parsnips were treated like a treat. Your mother would mash them with a hint of ale or milk, and you'd eat slowly, imagining you were noble enough for pudding. You try it now. It still doesn't taste like pudding, but it does taste like something that's trying its best. Historians occasionally praise parsnips as a forgotten luxury in the medieval diet. You wonder who had the luxury to forget. Around here, it's one of the few things that reminds you the earth hasn't given up yet. You chew slowly, savoring the sweetness the frost left behind. The cat purrs. The fire crackles. Outside, the frost climbs the windows, sketching delicate spirals like some unseen artist is trying to apologize for the weather. You eat another spoonful and think this root lived in the dark. It survived the cold, and now it warms me from the inside out. You could cry, but you don't. You chew. You smile. You get up. Because there are more parsnips still buried out there. More sweetness waiting for the cold to pass through. Just like you. You wake to a smell that could either be salvation or sabotage. It's sharp, pungent, piercing enough to open your eyes before your body agrees to follow. You sit up slowly, sniff again, and confirm the truth. Someone's chopping garlic. You didn't plan for garlic today. You haven't seen a whole bulb in weeks, but the smell is unmistakable, hot, earthy, and a little angry. It reaches straight into your brain and starts hammering on your sinuses like a warning bell. You pad to the hearth, bare feet on cold stone. There is a bundle of the stuff, half moldy, but still good in the middle, tied with twine and dangling near the fire. You must have put it there weeks ago. Maybe a neighbor dropped it off in trade. Maybe you forgot a debt. Either way, it's here now. Garlic is not elegance. Garlic is survival. It is the smell of bad breath and good luck. The smell of stew that might cure you or kill the cough trying to take your lungs. The smell of every grandmother who ever whispered that food is medicine and flavor is optional. You pull out your knife and begin to peel. The skin crumbles like paper. The cloves are gnarled, aged, stubborn, like all the best things that keep you alive. You toss one into the pot with leftover barley, half a rutabaga, and whatever you've got that doesn't smell like disappointment. The steam rises. It chokes a little on its way up. Your eyes water. Perfect. You eat with your mouth half open because garlic doesn't need manners. It doesn't ask permission. It arrives, demanding to be tasted, smelt, remembered. Historians still argue whether garlic was used as a staple or a remedy. You know it was both. You've rubbed it on wounds, hung it over the door, crushed it into oil for coughs, whispered a prayer, and smeared it behind your ears just in case. They say it repels spirits. You're not sure about that, but it definitely repels your neighbor, and sometimes that's more useful. You crush another clove. This one bites back, hot and acrid under your fingernails. You love it more for that. It reminds you of yourself. You remember a winter 2 years back when fever took half the village. You chewed raw garlic until your tongue blistered, then fed it to anyone who'd listen. Some got better, some didn't, but the ones who survived still smell like garlic when it rains. You stir the pot, taste again, still needs salt. But the garlic is doing the heavy lifting now. You sit down beside the hearth, bowl in hand, watching the cat pretend to ignore you while inching closer to your lap. You blow on your spoon. You think of all the things this little bulb has done. Flavored your meals, cleared your lungs, warded off the Reeves gossip and the midwife's suspicions. And you think, if I go down, it won't be quietly. It'll be smelling like this. You grin. Then take another bite. Because garlic might not be magic, but it's the closest thing you've got in this house. And it will do. The air smells like smoke and boiled regret, which means it's chard day. You didn't pick this. The chard picked you. It grows on its own now, wild in the corner by the compost heap. Big leafy monsters with stalks like bruised rainbows. You tried to ignore it last week, but this morning you walked outside and it was there, towering, demanding. You sigh. You grab your knife, because chard is like the neighbor who never quite leaves you alone. Loud, slightly bitter, always turning up when you least want it, but strangely useful in a crisis. You cut the outer leaves, thick and veiny. The stalks squeak under the blade like they object. You pile them in your basket, already dreading how small they'll become once cooked. You carry the leaves inside. They spill over the edges like they're trying to escape their fate. Chard never goes quietly. You rinse it in cold water. Dirt swirls in the basin. A slug appears. You sigh again. The pot waits on the hearth. You chop the leaves and stems, separate piles. You'll cook them differently. Stems first, then leaves. That's how your mother taught you. Because bitterness should be softened before it can help you. She wasn't talking just about vegetables. You drop the stems into boiling water. They hiss like they're angry. You understand. The leaves go in next. They wilt instantly. Turn from proud green banners to limp seaweed. You stir slowly. Add vinegar if you have it. Salt if you dare. Fat if the gods have smiled. They usually don't. Chard cooks down to almost nothing. You start with a basket. You end with a bowl. But that bowl is dense, hearty, slightly metallic in taste. It fills the corners of your stomach other food won't reach. You chew slowly. Think about all the times chard has shown up when everything else failed. After drought, after blight, after that one market day when the reeve accused you of bartering with cursed eggs. Chard doesn't care about curses. It grows anyway. Historians often skip over chard. They mention it in passing, if at all. A footnote in the saga of medieval greens. But in your world, it's a main character. It's what's for dinner and lunch. And on days when you're too tired to make decisions, breakfast. It grows where you didn't plant it. Survives frost you didn't see coming. Refuses to die even when the pig digs it up twice in 1 week. You admire that, even if you're tired of eating it. The cat refuses it entirely. She sniffed it once and hasn't forgiven you since. But you clean your bowl. You wipe it with the last of the crust. You lean back in your creaky stool and listen to your stomach stop growling. For today, that's victory. Tomorrow might bring peas or nothing. But today, you had chard. It was bitter. It was relentless. It was enough. You wake up hungry for something you can't name. Not bread. Not broth. Not turnip stew dreams. Something crisp. Something green. It's early spring again. The kind where the wind bites, but the sun pretends to warm you. The ground is still stubborn, but here and there, something stirs. You grab your basket and your knife and head toward the edges of the village. Not the tidy rows behind the cottage. Not the cabbage bed or the tired garlic patch. You're foraging today. You slip into the hedgerows like a fox who knows exactly where the chickens sleep. You move quiet, eyes down, ears open, searching for the first soft things of the year. Wild greens, the plants that don't belong to anyone, and yet somehow keep everyone alive. You find chickweed first, tiny, delicate, with starry white flowers and leaves that taste like green air. Next comes sorrel, sharp, tart like a lemon made of leaves. You chew a bit just for the memory of it. Dandelions already everywhere, of course. The yellow heads aren't here yet, but the leaves are, jagged and confident, as if they've never feared frost. You gather carefully, Because here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. These plants can save you, and they can kill you. Historians call them edible weeds, which is a nice way of saying you better know what you're doing. Because in a medieval peasant's life, the line between salad and stomachache is thin and often drawn in regret. You find nettles next. You weren't planning to. You don't have gloves. You pick them anyway. The sting makes your fingers hum. Your skin tingle like it remembers what pain is. You drop them into the sack, grateful and annoyed. Back at the hearth, you blanch them. Boiling water tames their bite, makes them soft. They taste like iron and earth, and old songs your grandmother used to hum while darning socks. You stir the pot slowly. Wild greens, a bit of barley, a scrap of bacon fat if you're lucky, or a memory of it if you're not. The steam is greenish. It smells alive. You sip carefully. It tastes like the edge of the woods, like defiance, like something that grew without permission and refuses to apologize. You eat in silence. Outside, birds argue over seeds. The wind presses at the shutters. The cat naps in the exact patch of sunlight that used to belong to your left foot. You smile, because today you didn't farm. You found. And that's different. There's a freedom in food you didn't have to sow, weed, water, worry over. Food that simply existed, waiting for someone to recognize it. You think of the first time you picked the wrong thing, chewed it raw, and spent a night curled up like a question mark, waiting to see if your heart would keep beating. It did. You learned. Now you teach others. Quietly. Which leaves to trust. Which to avoid. Which to boil for too long. Which to never pick under the full moon. Because survival is made of knowing. And knowledge in your hands tastes like soup that isn't poisonous. You finish your bowl. You pick nettle out of your teeth. You stretch your legs, tired but grateful. Because today you didn't just eat. You remembered. And remembering, especially the bitter things, is what keeps you alive. Rain again. It drums softly on the thatch above your head like someone playing a lazy lullaby on a dozen damp drums. You wake to the smell of wet wool, old garlic, and onions that should have been eaten last week. You stretch, pull your shawl over your head, and shuffle toward the hearth like a reluctant ghost. Today is Onion Day. It's not a holiday. It's a necessity. Because you've got half a loaf of bread, no dried meat, and one suspicious cabbage that may or may not still be cabbage. But the onions? The onions always come through. You open the storage sack. You take a breath. You cry immediately. Not because you're emotional, because these onions are strong. You peel the first one. It sprouted a little, a green spear breaking out of the top like a tiny rebellion. You forgive it. You would try to escape too if you lived in a sack in a damp corner. You slice. The cat leaves the room. Smart. Your eyes burn. Your nose runs. You smile. Because somehow, this is a comfort. You've lived more years than onions have layers, and you've cried over worse things than soup. You drop the slices into the pot with oil, or maybe just lard scrapings. They sizzle with the enthusiasm of something that knows it's the star today. You stir. You think of all the onions you've known. Small, sharp spring onions, long white scallions, stubby little shallots. You once tried to grow them from seed and ended up with what looked like spiteful chives. Still ate them. Historians write entire chapters about the role of bread in medieval peasant diets. But onions? They get a paragraph. That's unfair, because onions are everything. They're what turns water into broth, what turns bland into bite, what turns we have nothing into we can make something. You add barley. Again, you always add barley. You remember a feast once, someone's wedding, someone with coin, and they roasted whole onions, soft as butter, wrapped in leaves. You still dream about that. Today, you don't roast. You boil. But the smell fills the cottage like a promise. Warm, familiar, a little painful. You eat slowly. The broth clings to your teeth. The onions are soft, sweet, almost apologetic. They melt into the barley, into the memory of salt, into your belly. You wipe your eyes again. From the sting, not the sentiment. Probably. You set the spoon down and look outside. The rain continues, tapping gently like a neighbor too shy to knock. The garden's grateful, at least. So are the onions. They always grow, even in soil you cursed last autumn, even in the shadow of the pig pen. Even when you forget them, abandon them, insult them, onions return. You whisper thanks, not a prayer, just a nod of respect, because they deserve it. You pack up the rest of the soup, just in case tomorrow is worse. You tuck away the sprouted tops for planting later. You brush onion skins into the fire. They curl like petals and vanish into ash. And for a moment, you sit very still in a house that smells like resilience. You're fed. You're warm. You're crying. And you're fine with that. Because onions do that to you. And today, that's enough. You wake up with peas on your mind. Not fresh peas. It's far too early in the season for that. No, you're thinking of dried peas, the kind you put away months ago, thinking, I'll be grateful for this later. And now here you are. Later, grateful, and a little tired of barley. You make your way to the back of the pantry, past the empty crock, past the dusty jug that once held vinegar, and reach into the sack that sighs like a weary friend when you touch it. Split peas, hard as pebbles, pale green, some yellowed with age. You run your fingers through them like they're coins, like they might grant wishes if you stir long enough. They don't, but they do make soup. You scoop out 2 handfuls and drop them into the pot. Then cover them with water. They float at first, defiant. You know better. In a few hours, they'll surrender. They always do. You set the pot on the fire, then wait. Because with peas, everything is about waiting. Historians rarely mention split peas except as famine food, a fallback, but you know their value. They keep well, cook slow, fill the belly, keep hunger from knocking quite so loudly. They also, famously, last forever. You once found a jar of them hidden under the floorboards, left by someone long gone. You cooked them. They were fine. You smile at the memory. Food from the past, carried forward. Just like you, the water begins to bubble. You add garlic, maybe an onion if it hasn't turned, a dash of vinegar if the day feels fancy. You stir slowly. You don't rush this. Rushing peas means scraping them off the bottom of the pot later with a knife and regret. The smell fills the house. It's not delightful. It's not offensive. It's honest. Peas don't pretend to be anything they're not. You sit by the hearth and watch the pot. Time moves differently when there's soup on. You remember a game you played as a child, counting peas by ones, then twos, then threes, until the pot boiled over. You never won. The soup always won. You take your time now. By midday, the peas have dissolved into something thick, smooth, a little mushy. You dip your spoon. Blow once. Taste. It's good. Not in the way roast meat is good. Good in the way breathing is good. Essential. The kind of good that keeps your spine straight and your bones solid. The kind of good that hums quietly in your belly and says, "You'll last another day." You eat your fill, then eat a little more, then stop, not because you're full, but because you know better than to run out. You pour the rest into a crock and bury it under a cloth. It will taste better tomorrow. It always does. That's the secret of peas. They age well. They wait. They forgive. The cat sniffs the air, decides against it. You don't blame her. Peas aren't for flavor. They're for fortitude. And today, that's what you needed. You stretch. Roll your shoulders. Lick the spoon. And smile. Because you've eaten. And you've endured. And even peas can feel like a feast. If you're the one who made them, you wake up to roots. Not metaphorically. Literally. There's a tangle of something under your bedroll. You roll over and pull it free. A bundle of long, skinny vegetables with dirt still clinging to their skins, left there by your neighbor in trade for a jug of stale beer and a cracked coon. Salsify, she called them. Or maybe scarzonera. You're not sure which. You didn't ask because it was early and her breath smelled like last year's cider. She said, "They're good if you boil 'em like bones." Then she walked off, muttering about goats. So now you've got roots. Long, pale, slightly hairy things with a faintly medicinal scent. You sniff one. It smells like parsnip trying to get your attention. You shrug. You've cooked worse. You drag the bundle to the hearth, fill your pot with water, and get to work. Salsify, you've heard, is sometimes called the oyster plant. Not because it tastes like oysters, but because someone wished it did. You do not have the imagination required for that illusion. Still, you peel. The skin comes off easy once it's boiled a little, turning soft and rubbery like old linen. You slice one open. The inside is creamy white, almost pretty. It reminds you of candles, or bones, or the good kind of soap. You toss the pieces into the pot with onion, maybe some barley if you're feeling brave, and a pinch of salt that you've been hoarding like a secret. The smell is mild, pleasant, even. You taste the broth. It's earthy, subtle, the kind of taste that doesn't demand anything from you but patience. You sit and sip, slowly. The cat noses a slice of salsify, licks it once, and then curls up beside the fire like this was her idea all along. You wonder who first dug this stuff up and thought, yes, I will eat the plant that looks like a wizard's finger. Historians don't talk much about salsify or scurzonera. They show up in old garden lists and monkish herbals, usually misspelled, often confused with other roots. You suspect that's the way these vegetables like it. They're quiet, forgotten on purpose, the kind of food that thrives in the margins, just like you. You eat more than you planned. It's comforting in its plainness. You think about planting it yourself this year, digging a new row in the back corner where the soil's soft and nothing else ever takes. It would grow there. You know it, because salsify doesn't mind being ignored. It grows slow. It takes its time. It waits for frost and hardship, then says now. You sip the last of the broth and feel it settle deep in your stomach like agreement, like endurance. You smile, because even forgotten roots have their day. And today, so do you. You wake coughing. Not a sick cough, just the usual one. Smoke from the fire, dust from the rushes, a bit of yesterday's garlic rising for a second opinion. You sit up slowly, stretch until your joints remember how, and reach for the little sack under the bench. Inside, the last of the horseradish. You hold it up to the window. It's gnarled, beige, crusted with soil. It looks like something better left buried. You smile anyway, because horseradish isn't here to be pretty. It's here to wake you up. You lay it on the cutting board and pull your knife. The cat leaves the room. She remembers. You slice in, and the air hits back. Within seconds, your nose is on fire, your eyes are watering, and your brain is convinced something terrible is happening. You take a breath. Regret it. Take another anyway. This is what horseradish does. It clears your head better than prayer. It opens your lungs like a miracle and smells like one too. If the miracle was buried in peat and anger, you scrape the root into shavings, each one releasing a storm of scent that brings a tear to your eye, and possibly to the ghost in the corner, too. Historians have theories about horseradish used in medicine, food, magic. You don't bother with theories. You feel what it does. You mix the shavings with a bit of vinegar, maybe some salt if you haven't used it all. You spread it on bread, or what's pretending to be bread this week, and you eat. It bites back. Of course it does. That's the point. Horseradish doesn't soothe. It reminds. It tells you your face is still working. Your breath is still moving. Your nerves haven't all gone numb yet. Not completely. You wipe your eyes, take another bite, and feel something like clarity. Not joy, not peace, but sharpness. And some days, that's the better gift. You think of the time the Reeve sneezed for 15 minutes after tasting a bit. You kept a straight face. Somehow, you think of the healer who claimed it could cure melancholy, then refused to touch it again after it made her see stars for an hour. You think this is a root that knows how to make an entrance. And still, when food is low, when flavor has abandoned you, when winter's taste lingers on your tongue, horseradish arrives like a trumpet, and you welcome it, because it might not be kind, but it is honest. And you need honesty more than comfort today. You feed a scrap to the fire. Watch it flare with interest. The cat returns, sniffing cautiously. You offer her a piece. She sniffs, hisses, and backs away. You respect that. You clean your knife, wipe your face, and breathe deep again. This time on purpose. Because you're not sad today. You're awake. And that counts. You wake with a sore thumb and a sense of adventure. Because today's not a planting day, or a trading day, or even a decent soup day. Today is foraging day. The wild patch beyond the hedgerow has been calling for a while now, green and tangled, and slightly suspicious. You grab your basket, your knife, and a cautious optimism. You whisper a few words to the cat, who blinks in judgment and returns to sleep. Then you step out into the morning, mist like a woman, with absolutely nothing to lose but her lunch. You walk slow, not because you're tired, though you are, but because this kind of work demands patience. You're not picking vegetables from rows. You're hunting leafy whispers in the underbrush, half guided by memory and half by instinct. First, you find sorrel. Easy. Sharp leaves that taste like lemon and soil. You pluck a few. They'll brighten the pot or the mood, depending on the day. Next comes chickweed. Soft, star-shaped flowers. You nibble one. Still good. Then the tricky ones. Goosefoot, ground elder, shepherd's purse. Edible? Yes, mostly. Poisonous? Only if you confuse it with something you shouldn't have. which is, often, you pause in front of something green and glossy. Could be wild parsley. Could also be a mistake you don't get to make twice. You skip it. Smart. Historians rarely focus on the foraged diet of peasants. Too messy, too local, too dependent on women's memory and seasonal luck. But you know the truth. Half your meals grow between the fields, and most of your survival lives in the places no one bothers to tend. You find nettles, of course. You always do. They punish your fingers before they bless your bowl. You pick them anyway. You head home with a basket full of maybe salad, maybe supper, maybe lesson. The line is thin. Back in the kitchen, you sort carefully. Rinse twice. Boil long. A pinch of salt, a bit of barley, and suddenly the bowl is full of things that weren't meant to be meals, but became them. You sip the broth. It's bitter, complex, mysterious, like a friend who doesn't speak unless asked. You chew a leaf that tastes like it's scolding you for something you almost did wrong. You smile, because that's what wild greens do. They don't flatter. They warn. They say, I'm here, but know me well. And you do, because you've eaten the difference between safe and sorry. You've memorized the curve of deadly leaves and the smell of wisdom when it grows in the ditch. You eat slowly and feel grateful, because while others pray over storehouses, you give thanks for thickets. And where others see weeds, you see library. You wake to birdsong, not loud, not insistent, just enough to pull you gently from sleep and remind you that the season is turning. The wind has softened, the soil has warmed, and your knees will complain slightly less today, which feels like a luxury. You stretch, you rise, you check the hearth, you check the basket, and you smile, because there's food, not feast, but enough. There are turnips that haven't gone soft, a handful of barley, a bulb of garlic with one green shoot curling like a question mark, wild greens waiting to be washed, one last parsnip, slightly shriveled, but still willing, and it hits you, quiet and sudden. You made it through another winter. You walk outside into the light. The garden is half thawed, the rows still holding stories from the last frost. You bend down, run your fingers through the dirt. Cold, but forgiving. You press a seed into the earth. A new beginning. You sit back on your heels, looking over your shoulder at the cottage. It's small. It's crooked. It leaks in two corners and always smells faintly of onion. But it's yours. The cat sits on the windowsill like a queen surveying her realm. A ribbon dangles from her neck, red, frayed, familiar. You've spent your life growing forgotten things. Unwanted roots, overlooked leaves, bitter greens with names no one bothers to spell. And yet they fed you. They kept you. You eat them now with reverence. Not because they are delicious, because they are loyal. They grew when nothing else would. They kept showing up, season after season, even when the world didn't say thank you. Just like you make soup. You don't measure. You don't rush. You stir until the smell becomes memory. And then you eat. Every bite, a small hymn of survival. You chew the broth. You swallow the silence. And you rest. Not because the work is done, but because, for once, your hunger is not louder than your joy. And that, in a life like this, is something close to grace. Wind down 300 words. The sun sets slowly tonight. You light the fire, not out of necessity, but comfort. The cat curls by your feet, her purr a low, steady rhythm in the quiet. Your spoon rests in an empty bowl. The air smells faintly of leek, of chard, of old garlic, and victory. You're full, and for a peasant, that is a miracle. You sit in your chair, knees covered with a patched blanket. You stare at the flame, letting it tell you stories. You've heard them before. You've lived most of them. Turnips, beans, wild greens and roots that refused to stay buried. You remember the taste of survival. And it's not sweet, but it's strong, bitter, brave, stubborn in all the best ways. Like you take a deep breath. Hold it. Let it go. Tomorrow you'll plant more. Tomorrow you'll kneel in the dirt again and trust the world to answer. But tonight, you sleep with a belly that's full, with hands that have done enough, with a heart that still beats beneath calluses and courage. Let the wind blow softly. Let the fire hum. Let the vegetables you grew cradle you in their memory. You're still here. And that's everything. End of script. Sweet dreams.